I'm reading the short story collection Rejection by Tony Tulatamudi. The first story is called The Feminist, and it follows a young straight man as he tries to figure out how to attract the affections of women who keep relegating him to the friend zone. He tries aligning with them. He parrots back what he learns in his gender studies classes to them. He eyes the men with wider shoulders with resentment. He feels stuck. He doesn't seem to know how to cut between what women say they want from men and what they actually go for. He doesn't know how to be. I also read Ruth Whitman's book Boyhood last fall, which is all about how she doesn't know how to be a parent of 3 boys. How do you push them and long for them to thrive and also teach them how to make room for everybody else? There's not obviously one answer. And it's confusing because all the things we want from men can curdle into something we don't. Like confidence can become arrogance. Tenderness can be seen as weakness. Americans are confused about manhood. The Pew Center just recently asked how our culture views masculine or manly men, and a quarter of Americans said people view them negatively. 40% said we view them positively, and a third that, neither positive nor negative. We're pretty split. More men thought Americans viewed manly men negatively. More women thought they viewed manly men positively. 6.5 years ago, we asked our listeners how they think about manhood, how to be, what's hard, where they feel lost. It was during the first Trump presidency. And we're sharing that episode with you again because it seems to be something we've been scratching at over the last few months. Like Helena Rain and I talked about Baby Girl and its fantasy of a dominating young man. Gary Goldman told me about the scars of bullying from other men. We heard from male caregivers about the deep, tender work of being someone's primary carer and its costs. So it felt right to share again what we heard from a bunch of you, our listeners, about how you are sorting out manhood. Like some finding company on Reddit about their trouble with women, or how erectile dysfunction in your 70s made you look back with some horror about the ways you used to objectify women. Take a listen, and if you are a man or are raising a man or love a man and want to share more about what you're noticing about the mixed signals we have about manhood and masculinity and where you get stuck, record a voice memo and send it to us at deathsexmoney@slate.com.
I get this kind of paralysis where you're trying to be all these different things at the same time and unlearn past behaviors. And I know I'm not the only one that gets stuck there.
This is Death, Sex, and Money.
The definition of man is changing.
The show from Slate about the things we think about a lot.
The sexual revolution has done a lot of damage.
And need to talk about more.
It's always been sort of like, oh, we do what we want, dudes, whatever.
I'm Anna Sale.
Get the Angel Reese special at McDonald's now. Let's break it down. My favorite barbecue sauce, American cheese, crispy bacon, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun, of course. And don't forget the fries and a drink. Sound good? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating restaurants for a limited time.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
When I talked to a listener named Dwayne about manhood, he was 45 years old and feeling a lot like an awkward teenager.
I see a coworker who has an awesome dress, and I say they have an awesome dress, and I spend 30 minutes later going, is that okay? I don't know if that was okay, right?
Dwayne is married, a father, and was raised in rural Ohio in a religious family. And he told me it feels like what he learned about how to be a man doesn't apply anymore.
What I learned about being a man as a kid, I learned by watching, these older men, blaze a trail where they thought it was supposed to be. and getting, halfway down that path and realizing it's terrible. And so I, blunder about blazing my own trail that I hope is better for the person who comes behind me. And so here I am,
Dwayne emailed after we asked the men in our audience to answer the question, what's the most confusing thing about being a man today? We asked because we noticed there's a lot of conversation right now about men and how they should be or should not be. But I at least haven't been hearing a lot of conversation with men about that. And we heard back from you that Dwayne is not the only one feeling stuck in this moment of change.
I think we're confused about our place.
There's a very unclear set of expectations as far as how a man should behave.
The confusion comes from being told your definition isn't strong enough.
I'm now learning it's okay to cry.
But we've given no clear path to strength.
I think this is the crisis.
There's a vast silence at the heart of the interactions that men have with other men.
There's no clear rules, so this gets very, 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 very confusing.
We heard from a lot of men that they were feeling a need to change. But men also told us that actually letting go of some of the expectations they grew up with is not easy. That's what a listener named Dre Ray told me. When he reached out, he was 47. He owns a barber shop and some rental properties in Oakland, California. But he wrote us about when he just was out of high school and selling drugs. He says he had to follow clear rules.
As far as being a man, being tough, don't let nobody take advantage of you. If you was considered weak, it can lead to you eventually being murdered or kicked out the neighborhood. You can't be over here anymore. You're soft. This is not for you.
Did it feel like you had to perform a certain way?
Yeah, it did, because even though I grew up in that neighborhood, the people who sold drugs, they were of a different species. It was like they were real aggressive. I wasn't. I evolved into that. When I first started, I was a church boy. I was raised in the church. I actually sung in the choir. I can't sing, but I was either going to be the usher boy or the choir. So coming from that to this world was traumatic.
It was also dangerous. Dre was involved in shootouts. His best friend was murdered. But he kept at it until he was running drug operations in his neighborhood. Money and status was everything, he wrote in his email. Without it, you were a loser, a bum. What if someone had said to you when you're 18 or 19, when you're a young man, like, you know what? It's okay if someone thinks you're soft. Do you think that would have been good advice or bad advice?
In that particular environment and that moment in time, I probably would have said, so what, you think I'm soft or something? I don't know. It's unless it was someone of a higher economic, social standing to the point where I respected them. Like, okay, Michael Jordan back then was like, I idolized Michael Jordan. If Michael Jordan probably would have said something like that to me, then I might have listened to it. But just the average Joe, no. I'd have been like, you must be soft.
Dre was arrested when he was 26 and ended up serving 3 years in state prison. When he got out, he had to learn how to support himself legally.
It's a trip when you go from having something to nothing, how people treat you. I was back staying with my grandparents. That was a hard blow for me. I was driving the airport shuttle. I remember one time, my auntie, I had a 10-speed. And I'm about to ride the 10-speed to work. I didn't even have a vehicle. And then she said when I was coming out my bedroom with the bike on my way to work with the uniform on, which I felt like I looked like a clown, she said, and this almost pushed me back into the streets, she said, Andre. And I said, yes. She go, how does it feel? I said, what, working? She said, no. You had all these fancy cars and all this nice clothing, and now you're on a 10-speed going to work. Ha, ha, ha. And she just fell out laughing. She thought it was the funniest thing. And I remember my grandfather looked at her like, really? And then he turned and he looked at me and said, son, don't worry about it. Go to work. There's honor in all work. And I went to work.
How important is earning money to you now, as in the ways that you think about yourself as a man and a provider? How do you think about money?
I know that money isn't really that important, but it is important, right? It's like you need it to survive. It's like air and water. But as it relates to me as a man, if I didn't have the ability to take care of my family, I think that would weigh on me terribly.
When a listener named David in Decatur, Georgia became a parent, he and his wife decided that she would be the financial provider for their family while he stayed home with the kids.
The initial idea that my wife and I had that, this will be the obvious choice. And, these gender roles, they really are quite silly.
Uh-huh.
Well, maybe, but maybe not.
That was more than 2 decades ago. David says that even though being a stay-at-home dad was a choice he made freely, for him, it wasn't a good fit.
It was clearly not as fulfilling for me as it was for my women friends who were stay-at-home moms.
Oh, really? Like, what did you notice talking with them?
They cared about the intricacies of it and derived some sort of emotional payoff from it that I never got. You can look at it this way. I was in a job that wasn't making me real happy, and I was pretty angry at myself for a variety of reasons, for having made the decision in the first place, and then for not being good at, stiff upper lip, just make it through it sport.
Were there other men that you could talk to about this during that time?
Here's the ironic thing. People, well-meaning, lovely people would say, oh, my friend Bob is a stay-at-home dad. You two should get together. Mm-hmm. And the internal reaction in my head was, you know what? I don't really like stay-at-home dads. Those guys are kind of weenies.
You would think that.
Correct. Uh-huh. I know.
So you never kind of made a friend with another guy who was staying home with his kids?
Nope.
Huh.
Absolutely not. And was completely uninterested in doing so.
A listener named Stephen Ameo lives outside Detroit, where his wife stays at home with their 2 kids. He's built a different sort of family than the one he grew up in, where his dad wasn't around at all.
He was just absent when he left. I mean, I was 2, and my first memory of my father, unfortunately, is his hands around my mother's neck. It's almost like a dream when I look back.
For Stephen, being a man is all about providing for his family. When we talked, he was working the overnight shift as a manager of a commercial cleaning company.
I know I won't ever be able to give my girls all of what they want tangibly, but I know when they look at their father, they're going to see a man that treats his queen higher than any other woman. They're going to see a man that finds joy in hard work. That's what makes a man a man. You got to get up and you got to quit questioning things. Get up and do it. Don't complain what you don't have. Don't complain what you want. Don't complain that you get up and do it.
Does it feel like for you that to feel that sense of groundedness in your identity as a man, that it's been important to have traditional gender roles in your family?
Yes. So, my wife, every morning I wake up a little late because I get home a little late, and she brings me a coffee. We sleep on a fold-out bed, a little small place we call home. And I say, babe, you don't need to bring me a coffee. And she says, it's an honor to, okay? I come home, it's not that I'm not questioned, but I'm respected first. I'm appreciated first.
They don't ever say, toughen up, you're tough, come on, be a boy, be a man, like, ever. It's horrible,
Jack Milligan worked as a kindergarten teacher in Boston when we talked. He's a trans man. And at work, he tries to teach kids that they can be anything, no matter their gender.
I want my boys to know if they grow up and they want to, be some sort of breadwinner, then they can, but they don't have to. They don't need to do these things. There's roles as nurturers. There's roles as caregivers. There's roles for all sorts of things.
But Jack told me in his own life, he learned how presenting as male brings some constraints.
Yeah, there's a long list of things I'm trying to just navigate through. For example, when in a grocery store as a man, it isn't as socially acceptable to wave and smile and talk to small children that you don't know. Whereas when I was presenting as a female, if a kid was being goofy, we would smile at each other and maybe wave, and I'd smile at the parent, they'd smile back. And I learned that it doesn't sometimes feel right. I can feel a feeling, and that's male performance that I have to be better at.
He doesn't feel that pressure at work, though, especially with his students. To them, what kind of man he is just hasn't been a big deal.
When I transitioned 3 years ago, the kids were just so much better than the adults about everything, about pronouns, about the response. I mean, I literally had just one kid tell me, "Oh, my mom told me about you," and then just gave me a thumbs up. Okay,
thumbs up.
Let's keep playing.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Wow, parents are just still gee, he, oh, sorry, this, oh. And the kids are just seamless. They just went right about their business, and their gender norms are just so blurry, and I love it.
Well, it's interesting to me. You talked about the conversations with little boys and making sure they know that they have a wide range of what they can be interested in and want to do. Does it feel like the little girls have that assumption more built in?
And I'm possibly, and I feel like there was a push on the girls can be anything, obviously, and that I love that push. And I think remembering to bring the boys along to say they can also be anything too. I would say that it is easier for girls to be freer than the boys right now.
Coming up, more men on how being a man is changing.
I think the Me Too movement has been so powerful and strong and awesome in a lot of ways, but it kind of bums me out that straight men have had to be villainized in a way.
I usually don't ever think about what I say, but recently I actually do.
I feel now it's a little harder to walk up to women and just start talking to them. They're more standoffish.
You see someone who's a man and you don't think of him as a gentleman unless he explicitly acts like it.
This new year, why not let Audible expand your life by listening? Explore over 1 million audiobooks, podcasts, and exclusive Audible originals that'll inspire and motivate you. I've been using the Audible app on family road trips. It's been fun to find things that appeal to all of us, parents and elementary-age kids. I've got 2 recommendations. First, The Wonder of Stevie, the Audible Originals podcast series about Stevie Wonder's incomparable run of creative output in the 1970s. It's really well made and an important cultural literacy education for my kids. The music is so good. And recommendation 2, Hatchet, a young adult novel by Gary Paulson about a boy trying to survive in the wilderness. The one we listened to was narrated by Peter Coyote. It's fantastic and had us so worried about what was going to happen to young Brian. Audible has thousands of titles right at your fingertips. They have audiobooks, podcasts, and guided wellness programs. Just open the app and tap into your well-being with advice and insight from leading influencers, experts, and professionals. Whatever your focus or interest, there's a listen for it on Audible. You'll find titles on health, relationships, career, finance, and so much more. Ultimately, it can be about starting good habits. Making a positive change is the best resolution you can make for yourself, and Audible can help. Let Audible help you reach the goals you set for yourself. Start listening today when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/DSM. New members can try Audible now for free for 30 days with your first audiobook included. Visit audible.com/DSM or text DSM to 500-500. That's audible.com/DSM or text DSM to 500-500. When it comes to grocery shopping, there are some common problems. Maybe you just don't have time to shop, or you have special dietary needs or health goals that are tough to stay on top of, or that are changing. And also, it can get a little boring at grocery shopping week to week. That can all change thanks to Hungry Root. It's the easiest way to eat healthy and add a little variety to your life. Hungry Root takes care of the weekly grocery shopping, recommending healthy groceries tailored to your taste. They have great options for the whole family, like top quality meat and seafood, smoothies, kids snacks, ready-to-eat meals, salad kits, and even supplements. And my family, we are trying to be more conscious about salt and also eating more fiber. And you can actually go into your Hungry Root preferences and ask for those kinds of things. And as you get different meals and rate them, Hungry Root gets to know you and becomes better at guessing what new things you might like to try. You can also always edit the cart that they put together for you, so you are delegating all the meal planning, but hang on to all the decision-making power. You are going to love Hungry Root. Take advantage of this exclusive offer for a limited time. Get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/DSM and use code DSM. That's hungryroot.com/DSM, code DSM to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/DSM, code DSM. Plastic, we are learning, is in more and more places. We don't want it. Blueland says the average person eats and drinks roughly a credit card's worth of plastic a week. That's right. The products that people use every day are ultimately contaminating the water supply, generating hundreds of microplastics that we end up ingesting. So Blueland set out to eliminate the need for single-use plastic in the products people reach for the most. The idea is simple. They offer refillable cleaning products. Fill your reusable bottles with water, drop in the tablets, and wait for them to dissolve. Refills start at just $2.25, and you can even set up a subscription or buy in bulk for additional savings. Blueland products are independently tested to perform alongside major brands and are free from dyes, bleach, and harsh chemicals. I really appreciate being able to walk past all the giant plastic bottles of laundry detergent and dishwasher soap because I've got my Blueland metal tins filled with discs of soap. And I also appreciate how using Blueland makes me more conscious day to day of all the ways I can avoid single-use plastic packaging. Blueland has a special offer for our listeners right now. Get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/DSM. You won't want to miss this. Just go to blueland.com/DSM for 15% off. That's blueland.com/DSM to get 15% off. This is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate. I'm Anna Sale. When a listener named Charles was a boy, he felt like he never got to choose what kind of guy he got to be. He remembers being told what being a man meant, and it wasn't good.
I grew up in a very, very liberal town, and there were a few family friends and kids on the schoolyard who had been raised in a radical feminist environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would use that. They would use the ideology as a sort of a bludgeon.
And you mean like they would, like a sort of like anti-male behavior? Is that what you mean, or?
It was sort of the, you and the patriarchy and da-da-da, and I didn't really understand it. But it was just being used as a taunt,
Mm-hmm.
or at least I absorbed it as a taunt. This is one of the first instances of somebody explaining to me that I was responsible for people's fear of me.
Charles is a big guy, and when he was a teenager, the way his body looked to other people changed faster than the way he saw himself. He wrote us an email about a fight he had with his mom when he was 15.
I don't remember what it was about, but I remember sort of wishing to make my point and raising my voice, probably for the first time, and she just drew back, and she was visibly afraid of me. And I was horrified with myself.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that this body that I was growing to inhabit at that time could be a threatening object hadn't really been a part of my self-image to that point.
It really, the language you used in your email when you said it it hurts to be the monster. It can feel so sort of alienating to be seen in a way that's threatening when that's not what you intend.
Yeah, that's probably one of the hardest things, is to just be walking around and having people be afraid of you.
When have you felt the most lonely in your life?
Probably when I was in college, and I was very heavy and I had very few friends. And I felt like there was no real chance to be a part of a society.
Did you feel angry at that time, that you felt so cut out?
Absolutely. I mean, I still feel angry when my anger is not an out of control smashing rage. It's just something cold that I feel inside of me.
Mm-hmm. Where have you directed anger? Like, are there people or ways, things that you've been angry at?
Not individual people. I've directed it at, this is, now we're getting really to the crux of it, because I do occasionally, when I'm really wallowing in it, find myself being angry not at any individual woman, but at women in general. And I recognize very easily how easy and how good it would feel to go down that path of becoming an outright misogynist. I do have to fight that back and understand that it's not something that is that makes sense. It's not anything that's real.
And just help me understand, like in a moment where you're having a feeling you're not proud of, what does it sound like?
I wish that people would not be so afraid of me. I wish that people wouldn't hate me. I hate them for hating me. Again, and then I catch myself, a blink of an eye later and recognize that I'm being stupid. But I do feel it.
Are you currently dating, Frederick?
Single, ready to mingle.
He might be stung with the family bug.
A son and his father talking together.
I was 41 when I got married.
Right, there is a precedent.
Yeah.
In my defense. Yeah.
When we first made this episode in 2018, we did a survey of 1,600 men in partnership with 538 and SurveyMonkey. Most men, 6 and 10, said they got their ideas about how to be a good man from the first man they knew, their fathers. Like Frederick. When we talked, he was 34 and living in Little Rock, Arkansas, where he grew up. He said he looked to his father as a model, even though for him, that left some gaps.
I didn't grow up around any out gay men. And so I couldn't really imagine what a life would look like for me based on the men that I was encountering.
I could probably think of at least 8 or 10 folk that was in our immediate area that were, at least to me, they were not secretive.
That's Freeman, Frederick's dad. He and his son are nearly 50 years apart in age. When Freeman was growing up in segregated Little Rock in the 30s and 40s, he says he never got explicit instruction for how to be a man. It was just understood that it was about fitting in.
I mean, we didn't sit down and have a class in terms of what it would require to be a good man. But, I mean, the conversations that you would hear in talking about who was a good man and who was not a good man.
The shade.
And which one that you were expected to follow was that was a conversation that you would hear.
When it came to teaching his 2 sons how to be men, Freeman wanted Frederick and his brother to be active in the community, just like he'd been taught, which meant that his boys should play football.
And so I didn't come to it by native interest. I was trying to be the boy that I thought that I was supposed to be, and probably was afraid that I was failing to be, more so than anything.
The thing that I was interested in or thought was important was that they not be isolated from their peers in the community. Now, football was the activity in our neighborhood where all their peers were they were engaged in that.
It's what everybody was doing.
If they hadn't been engaged in that, they would have been about the only one at home after school.
Yeah.
I mean, in the whole neighborhood.
The physical activities that I would have pursued probably would have isolated me from my community. I made requests to take gymnastics lessons. Eventually, gymnastics turned into wanting to take dance lessons. And I remember both wanting to explore my body in ways that didn't necessarily feel overtly male or masculine. I wanted to begin to sort of explore my body in that way, and I wanted sort of the privacy of that. And I most of the spaces that I think my dad would have encouraged me to participate in did not allow for that kind of privacy.
Frederick quit football after his freshman year with his dad's blessing. He left Arkansas for college and just moved back earlier this year. Freeman also left when he was a young man. He was one of the first Peace Corps volunteers. And Frederick says he could feel how that time away shaped his father as a man.
Dad, I always liked hearing you talk about sort of having to transition the perspectives that you gained while you were abroad back to Arkansas. Like, I feel like throughout my life, I've never felt you exerting a lot of pressure to be a certain type of man. And I just wondered how you came by that expansiveness.
I never extended to others the privilege of painting the box that I was in. Mm-hmm. And so I certainly didn't want to try to paint that box for somebody else. And remember when we were growing up, we were children. I mean, there was a lot of boxes people tried to put us in. There were people tried to put our community, the community I grew up in, tried to put it in a box. I always felt that you limit yourself because if you put them in a box, you got to stay there to hold them in the box. Otherwise, they'll just get out. And so to me, that would be wasted energy. So I always just felt that you give the person a support and let them go the direction that they that they wanted to go or that they felt they needed to go.
Other men we talked to back in 2018 didn't feel at all like they had enough models for how to be a man.
Just be yourself, I feel like, is really bad advice. I feel like people say, if you be yourself, you'll eventually find someone. And I feel like that's really, not true, to say the least.
When we talked, a listener named Alex had just moved home to San Diego after finishing college, and he was feeling like he was not measuring up as a man.
I think in many ways I have not been a very successful man. I haven't really dated much. I'm still a virgin at age 23. I don't really have a job. I'm not exactly the most physically fit person in the entire world. So a lot of these things that you traditionally associate with masculinity, I don't really have any of those kind of things.
Part of the problem, Alex told me, is he spends a lot of time online, where there's a lot to compare yourself to.
I think the internet's the worst thing that's ever happened to this generation of people. I feel like it's kind of distorted a lot of the ways I see things. It's given me a lot of self-confidence issues about being a man. And it's shaped my thinking because on the internet, for many, many years, up until recently, it was a very male-dominated space. Maybe not by numbers, but culturally. And so because of that, you see a lot of really toxic kind of ideologies floating around. It's really easy for them to gain a lot of traction.
Is that something you consume?
Yeah, kind of like people consume bad television. As the way I describe it, it's kind of an entertainment for me.
One of the things Alex reads is The Red Pill, a thread on Reddit where men ridicule women, deride feminism in general, and share advice on how to become what they call alpha males.
Red Pill fundamentally believes that every single man, no matter who he may be, can work out and can improve themselves and actually be successful with women. So, Red Pill's danger is that it gives good advice, and so people always end up seeing that their advice kind of works, and then falling into the wider ideology along with it.
Have you ever worried that you might fall into that?
No.
What do you get out of it?
I'm just curious about the way these people think. It's just fascinating, especially to see the way that they've evolved over the years. But a lot of it also comes from maybe not feeling quite as alone in the world, knowing that men out there are also struggling. Maybe they come to the wrong answer, but it's not just me who kind of feels a little bit adrift. That's probably more of what it is.
Coming up, a man who, pre-internet, defined himself by how many women he could get in real life, and how he looks back on that now that he experiences erectile dysfunction. This episode is brought to you by Discover. If you've listened to Death, Sex, and Money for a while, you know how important acceptance is when it comes to personal growth. And you know who else is big on acceptance? Discover. You see, Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. That's a whole lot of places and a whole lot of acceptance, which is great for Discover, but even better for you. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/creditcard. Who doesn't love the good things in life? Everyone enjoys a little luxury, but it's not always affordable, except when it comes to Quince. Quince is the go-to for luxury essentials at affordable prices. It is sweater weather where I live, and I am always grabbing my Quince fisherman sweater on the way out the door. I also got my husband a Quince zip front cardigan for Christmas, and he wears it a lot, which makes him feel warm and makes me feel like a wife who knows how to get a good gift. Quince offers a range of high-quality items at prices within reach, like washable silk tops and dresses, organic cotton sweaters, and 14-karat gold jewelry. The best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They do it by partnering directly with top factories to cut out the cost of the middleman and pass the savings on to you. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. Give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/DSM for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/DSM to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/DSM. When a listener we're calling Luke was a young man in Los Angeles, he found his sense of identity as a man not on the internet, but in the bedroom.
At that point, my sex drive was all-consuming. How many people I was sleeping with, it's sort of like that became my measure of manhood. Every place I went, I was looking at who was the most attractive, who might be available. Seeing a very attractive woman was a great turn-on, of something strongly desired. And if she was not available, there was sort of resentment. And for me, there was self-put-down about that, too.
And so just so I have a sense, say in one of your most sexually active years, how many different women would you say you slept with?
20 or 30.
When you think back on that time and the way that you thought about sex and having sex with women, are there things that you feel regret about?
I feel regret for myself in that I was so insecure, that I was missing a lot of life, that there was so much more to be scene in the world than just sizing up how pretty a woman was when I walked into a room, or who was the prettiest woman in the room, or something like that. So looking back upon it, it was kind of shallow, but it was still a deep drive that kind of controlled me.
Do you think when you were entering rooms and sizing up women's attractiveness, do you think the women could tell?
I'm sure they could. I don't think I was one who leered a lot, but I think people can tell when they're being looked at and looked up and down and judged.
Does that feel embarrassing to think about?
Yes, that does feel embarrassing. And it wasn't something I necessarily was aware of at the time, but looking back, yes, I think that makes people uncomfortable, as it should.
How important is sex to you now at 71?
That's one of the big identity issues that's faced me. It's actually the reason I responded to the call you put out, which I didn't expect to. I just sort of found myself sending this email because I'm finding my own big transition in my 70s because around sex, it is totally different. When I got into my certainly late 60s and now, my sex drive has diminished to a very low level. And then on top of that, a few years ago, I had to have surgery for prostate cancer, and I lost that sexual ability. Fortunately, because I don't have the drive to do much about it, but it's gone. And so as a man, part of what defined me for so many years, and I'm sure defines most men, is simply not there.
Do you think it's changed the way you move through the world?
It has a bit. I realize that I'm a sexually impotent older man. And so I'm really aware of that. The sense of moving around partly invisible because I'm an older guy, and partly being reminded that I'm also impotent.
I'm struck by how you said the word impotent without pause, and that word is so charged. Is that a word that you have easily embraced? Why do you use that word?
Because that is reality, and you face reality. If you're going to be healthy with anything, you face what's real, and what's real for me is that impotence, and so I don't deny it. That's what I have right now.
Impotence can be physical or existential, just a feeling of helplessness as a man. That's what a listener named Cisco wrote about in his email to us. Not his helplessness, but his dad's.
When I think of my dad, he's sort of a diminutive guy. Like, he's not very large in stature. But I don't picture him as small. And growing up, he put a lot of emphasis on providing for us and keeping us safe.
But when Cisco was in elementary school, his home was broken into while the whole family was there. This wasn't just a robbery. They were tied up and held at gunpoint. No one was hurt, but Cisco says the experience scarred his dad.
He did everything that he possibly could in the time after that to make sure that we were safe, to try to make us feel safe. So he bought guns and had guns around the house. We installed an alarm system. We had floodlights put around our house that we turned on religiously. And so, we did all these things to try to feel safe. And it didn't, it always felt a little bit better, but it never quite felt like enough.
Was there a time in your life when you realized, I need to change some definitions in how I think about manhood or masculinity, or was it more just kind of this is an outgrowth of the kind of kid you were and who you grew up to be?
I think I feel like this is going to go down a rabbit hole a little bit, but we'll see where it takes us.
Okay.
This is when I was in middle school and high school. I spent a lot of time at church, a lot of time in youth group, all those kinds of things, and my faith has always been something that's really, really important to me. And the thing that's really complicated definitions has honestly been thinking about the way that people talk about God. And especially since we get to where we throw father language in with God language, and then all powerful and all those kinds of sort of superlative terms. At some point, I really wanted to reimagine some of that stuff, because I don't see enough capacity in those terms.
That like the words that you've had for God and what God has meant in your life have felt too small, and then to expand those is to also expand how you think of yourself as a man.
Yeah. That maps onto this conversation pretty easily.
I'll ask honestly, like, do women have conversations about what it means to be a woman?
This is Dwayne again, from the start of the episode. I feel, not directly in those words, but there's a lot around work, motherhood, ambition, caregiving, which I feel like I know is really about, we're talking about what it is to be a woman, but we don't say, tell me.
Right. And that's the reason sort of I poked at that just a little bit, because I don't think of it as conversations about how to be a man. You kind of learn what you're supposed to do, but nobody tells you anything. You know, my father, when he got angry, he yelled. His father, when he got angry, he yelled and threw things. There was always sort of this hint of justification that that his father was worse, and somehow his improvement was better and forgivable. Like that makes it okay.
And then one last question, and that is, when you think about being a man now versus being a man in your father's generation, do you think it's gotten easier or harder?
I'm going to say harder. And the only reason I'm going to say harder is when you're not self-aware, it's fine. When you don't realize you're the asshole in the room, it's fine, right? When you don't have people pointing out that your bad behavior is bad, there's nothing wrong.
Thank you to all the men who shared your stories with us as we worked on this episode in 2018. And I have a few updates to share. Dwayne wrote to say that in the years since the episode ran, quote, my son transitioned and he's now off to college. I picked up and moved to New York City with my wife, Jess, and I turned 50. He said he's thinking a lot about male friendship. I never envisioned myself as the guy who poured himself into his work and woke up with few close friends at middle age, but here we are, he wrote. I do wonder if I've forgotten how to make friends, or if maybe we all have. Stephen says he's still working at the same commercial cleaning company, but in a different role that allows him to work remotely from home, while his wife, who's since finished school, has a flourishing career. He wrote to say, things have changed in my life, but my views on masculinity have not. Traditional gender roles are still important to him, he said, in the way of not competing to be the best, but rather living into our natural differences and becoming one. And Dre wrote to say that the last few years have also brought a lot of change. He had a baby, a daughter, during the pandemic. He was able to hang on to his barber shop during that time. The rental properties and a side business selling face masks also helped. He said he's been helped by thinking about Jesus Christ as a model for manhood. He wrote, when he was on earth, he was a gangster. He came and went against the most powerful people at the time and never backed down. He wrote, "So many so-called men say one thing and do another. That's not being a man. I was taught to always say what you mean and stand on it. One of the main components of being a man is keeping your word." This episode was produced in 2018 by Annabelle Bacon, Stephanie Joyce, Emily Botine, and me, with help from Dan Boyce and Ian Koss. Zoe Ajoulay produced this refeed. The rest of the Death, Sex, and Money show team includes Andrew Dunn and Cameron Drews. Daisy Rosario is our senior supervising producer at Slate. Hillary Fry is Slate's editor-in-chief. Please support the production of our show by becoming a member of Slate Plus. You'll not only be supporting our work on Death, Sex, and Money, you'll also get access to things like ad-free listening to our show and all the Slate podcasts like Slow Burn and Decoder Ring. And we also make special drops just for Slate Plus listeners. You can subscribe directly from the Death, Sex, and Money show page on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or visit slate.com/DSM Plus to get access wherever you listen. Our theme music is by the Reverend John DeLore and Steve Lewis. If you're new to our show, welcome. We're glad you're here. You can find us and follow us on Instagram at deathsexmoney. And I write a weekly newsletter. You can subscribe at annasale.substack.com. And you can reach us anytime with voice memos, pep talks, questions, or critiques at our email address, deathsexmoney@slate.com. We love hearing from you. I'm Anna Sale, and this is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate.